water
Anybody
tower facility.
decide they would want to
And
walk
so-
that thing.
It's
For
like,
for
one
recreational
of those
purposes,
things,
yeah.
it's a big deal. 'cause
I
it's
mean,
something
it's
that's
not
really
bad
bad.
at all.
Yeah, honestly, I'd be careful.
So I'm
I mean,
like,
I just,
okay.
I would be too.
Now it, like,
Even
I
at-
saw the
even
dollar
at
signs,
30
it's
or
on the
40.
scale of these projects.
35.
35.
Yeah, which I don't drive 35
Well,
on
see,
that
you got-
thing,
you
so.
got it.
Nobody does.
No.
Oh, no. I mean, I'm in the flow. I'm not hauling it because I'm the first one. I'm in the, I'm in the
Yeah,
middle
you're
of it.
following, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten it, I haven't received the occupancy numbers or the ridership numbers yet for this summer, but I suspect that because of the weather, I suspect that they were lower than the first.
This weekend,
Yeah.
yeah. I want,
Traffic on the parking. Had a lot of-
Yeah.
Yeah.
even, we didn't go to Folly because we wouldn't go if it was sunny,
Mhm.
or only if it were sunny. I even looked on Saturday just out of curiosity. Even on Saturday, when it was nice out.
Yeah,
there.
well, we may be going live, we're.
Oh, were they not?
No.
Yeah.
No, I talked to him this morning and he gave me a little bit of an update on the. He still needs a little bit.
Wanted me to say something to them after the meeting.
You know, I think they picked up on the food truck conversation. I think it's just slow news day.
Yeah.
Because the-
Y'all, I think we are, we're trying to stop it, but I think we're.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
We can get it all.
Uh,
Okay, great.
Okay. that'd be good. So I'll just call on you for the update. on
Yep.
that.
Live. Apparently.
We're live whether we like it or not, I guess.
We're figuring it out.
Douglas, can you hear me? All right.
I went to Florence this weekend.
What? What?
I have friends there.
Oh, okay. So that's exactly what they're-
I know.
So, I'm sorry, where did you go?
Florence,
Oh. Cool.
we have some friends that moved up out there, so it's a nice drive.
Nice.
So I don't know. if you need-
I like that.
No, I mean, I'm was kind of hoping you'd say, yeah, I got something. Not really. Not really expecting it. My real dream is those lagoons.
Just give me an update.
Be converted into pretty incredible wave pools now, like real surfable waves. And that's what I was hoping to put in, or I would love to. There's just a couple brands that make those pumps that can.
It's 1:30, Chairman, if
I
you,
would love to.
Live already.
since we're live, yeah.
That's the dream.
Rusty, we can go ahead. Whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. It's 1:30 PM, Monday, June the 7th, and we are convening the Real Property Committee meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have all of our committee members present, along with our city administrator and other city staff are in attendance as well. First order of business is approval of previous meetings minutes. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposed. Next on the agenda is citizens' comments. Do we have any citizens' comments, Desiree?
We did not receive any requests to speak before the committee, or we didn't receive any written comments either, so.
Okay, thank you very much. And next order of business, marina tenant comments. Do we have any comments from them?
Same thing, we haven't received any requests.
Okay, no comments from the marina tenants. Let's move on to old business. I'd like to start with item number A, update on the Marina Dock Rehabilitation Project. So Desiree, do you want to lead that off?
Absolutely. So in your packets, I included the PowerPoint presentation that ATM and Salmons presented to Ways and Means Committee last month, just for some information. It has some pictures of the current progress. I thought it would be good to include here, but since then, we've made some progress, as you all have seen. The restaurant on the face dock, the docks there and the anchor pilings have been installed. The barge has left the marina as scheduled, right on point per the schedule again that we received back in mid-May. They did not encounter any pile driving issues, which was something that was giving a lot of us a lot of anxiety, but thankfully that worked out pretty well. The ATM, Epic Engineering, Salmons, and Transworld, part of the utility subcontractors, they and the marina manager walked the docks last week and sited all power pedestals and the fire suppression cabinets. They are installed. They're going to be installed in the next coming days and weeks. They just finalized the placement. The cleats and bollards have been installed in both the restaurant and the face dock. The gangways are in order from the manufacturer. We're waiting on an update on shipping and the delivery for those. Material shortages have caused an unforeseen production delays of the gangway, as Kirby reported. 2 gangways serving the dock area C should arrive to the site at the end of this month, which is good news. At the latest, early July. And you remember that our goal is to have that whole area serviceable and usable for the 4th of July weekend. So as of right now, we are on track to meet that. Regarding the finalization of the fuel hut design, the marina manager, Epic, ATMs, and Salmons, and Evans and Smith, who's the architect, met last week to finalize some questions over the fuel hut design, and that should be getting ready for submittal for the building, for a building permit. That would be going to Douglas's office. Final structural connections to the floating dock remain to be done as the final electrical engineering for the interior of the hut is finalized. Salmons is coordinating directly with Structure Marine on the fuel hut platform. The drawings, calculations have not yet been received and were originally promised to be provided by Structure Marine in mid-May. So they're running on a little bit of a delay. However, the updated schedule that has us finalizing the fuel hut installation after Labor Day should be, we should be meeting that at the latest. We are coordinating with Salmons the updated project schedule that was presented to the city in mid-May, and any associated contractual changes that need to be approved by the city moving forward. That's all I have.
Okay, well, that's quite a bit. A couple of things I wanted to note. I mean, I've been going down there frequently, just to look at the dock construction, and it is outstanding looking down there. It really is coming together, and I think probably fellow council members have probably noted that as well. But it's really good to see the progress is being made, and as we move on and complete the docks, it's going to be a real positive, a real showplace down there. And we've still got that. Looks like we're on track for July the 4th, hopefully, for Dock C to be in service, as you mentioned. Hopefully that happens by 4th of July, and then the end date completion of everything should be by mid-November. Correct.
Correct.
Okay. All right,
And
John.
certainly the goal is to have all of the utilities installed and operational before July 4th. If for some reason power or water is not finalized, everything can be buttoned up and still be used for the holiday weekend. So certainly that's the goal, but if there are any delays on the utility installation, it could still be used by transient and by boaters over that weekend with no issue.
Okay, John.
Yeah, just do we have an idea? This is a question we always ask on projects that we're doing in the software world, but what's going to stop us from being open by July 4th? If there was something that was going to happen, what would that be?
At this point, because the piles have been driven and the floating docks are secured, they could be used right now. It's just that the utility
Just
work,
utilities,
it's
yeah.
just the utility work,
Right.
correct? So that's why I said, even if by July 4th, some utilities are still pending, it won't hinder our ability
Yeah.
for them to be used.
We're open July 4th. That's what I'm
Correct.
hearing.
Kevin, anything?
Well, yeah, and I don't know about the gangplank, that 82-foot gangplank for the ADA. I don't know when that'll be in, but that might get a little close to July 4th, but I'm with Rusty. I've been amazed on this project, on how well they have done and how quickly they have done it. And also too, I spoke to the superintendent, and I don't know if they shared with you, Desiree, but the pylon that broke off,
Mhm.
they found it, but it was broken off below the pluff.
Below the
mud.
mud line.
So there was no
Mhm.
stub sticking up or whatever. So,
Correct. So we got the cheap option, the 14,000 though.
correct, correct. But no, it's gone really well. So thanks to
Mhm.
Douglas and staff and everybody involved.
Right. Did you happen to get the video of them raising that broken piling?
I may have on my phone. I know I took some pictures, but I
Yeah.
don't have, I'm not sure if
I
I
think
took a
John
video.
Bushnell had taken a video from the restaurant, the upper level.
Oh, he may have, because
Yeah.
we met with them. Yeah, we were with him
Oh,
when it was
really?
happening.
Okay,
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I took pictures. I didn't
Oh,
take
okay.
a video, but it came off like butter. I mean, I certainly looked very easy and seamless. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
No, sir.
All right, let's move on. Item B, update on the Marina Restaurant renovation by Marker 116 LLC. Desiree, I think you're going to handle this as well, correct?
Yes, I'm happy to. Douglas and I met with John Bushnell, Dave Lorenz, and James Frank, who is our owner's representative from Insight Group, who's going to be overseeing this construction renovation on behalf of the city. We had our first meeting last week. We met on site, walked the whole building, saw that the demolition has been completed in the building. And we've set up a weekly schedule to start meeting every Thursday afternoon to just keep on, receiving constant updates, and for James to be communicating and supervising, if you will. I don't know if the word supervising, but overseeing the work that's been done and addressing any issues, making a report to the city, so that we're aware of the progress that the contractors performing at the restaurant site. So that is going to start later this month. I think mid-June is what we've got it scheduled right now. But other than that, demolition has been completed, and they're just continuing to work on finalizing the some design elements that were still pending.
Their mechanical drawings are kind of the critical path hold up at this point, which I think they say they're gonna have this week. And once they have those, they kind of know their path forward. So should be, once they get started, it should be progressing nicely. They're a little bit of a hole for engineers.
Okay.
Just one more
Okay,
thing.
yes.
You all recall that council approved the not to exceed $60,000 amount for the improvements of the parking lot. So we've sent all of that documentation to the city attorney, and we're waiting for a final contract to be drafted so that we can execute that and get that work scheduled for the corner parking lot that we're contractually obligated to improve.
All right. Any questions, John or Kevin? Comments?
Just a quick question. Desiree, I think you mentioned that Insight was hired or going to be hired to sort of be our eyes and ears on the project as they go along.
Correct.
Have they started yet? Like,
They have received a copy of all the plans and specifications, so those have been reviewed, and we had our first meeting with them last week.
excellent. Will they're a third-party inspector as well. So do you plan on using them for inspections, or just William will?
Just William.
Okay.
For the special inspections, there really aren't any on the work that they're doing. So And that would be incumbent upon the tenants to do that, to organize that. We did make mention that if they need a third-party special inspector, Insight could certainly do it for them. But at this point, I don't think they have anything that requires a special inspection.
Gotcha. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any update on timing in terms of being able to get all or part of this restaurant open at this point? I know we're gonna have some further discussion later on, but
No, the tenants haven't provided a new timeline yet.
okay. All right. All right. No other questions. We'll move on to item number C, which is update and discussion on the ADA compliant dual purpose beach boardwalk at 42nd Avenue beach access. So who wants to take this? Desiree or
I'll
Douglas Card?
set it up and
Okay.
Douglas and I will just continue a discussion with you all because we are at a point where we're seeking guidance. So as you all know, this whole project started with the vision of installing an elevated boardwalk that would be ADA compliant along the beach access path on 42nd Avenue. And the vision was to have that for pedestrians and then maintain the vehicular access on the other side because of that path being so wide, having the ability to accommodate both. Just a little bit of history. We had a meeting with the residents from that area, and there were concerns expressed about the elevated boardwalk and somewhat changing the current conditions in that area and maybe how do I say?
Making it more attractive.
Making it more attractive and maybe having increase in traffic in that area and then concerns of it being mostly residential and whatnot. So we came back with a different alternative that did not contemplate creating an elevated boardwalk. And we looked at this material, Mr. Boardwalk, which, as you all know, we've kind of looked at it, we've discussed it. We submitted an amendment to our Greenbelt Board application, agreement funding application to allow for the city to use the funds allocated for the boardwalk for this different material that would still be ADA compliant and enhance the beach access path for folks with disabilities. Since then, we've done, more research, talked to people that have used this material in other communities, and also certainly engaged citizens that would be using the path that are handicapped, have handicapped disabilities. And there were concerns about whether this material would actually be an enhancement to the current material that we have on site or not. I reached out to Sullivan's Island. It has been years since they no longer use that material. Not only, they had issues with maintenance, but they also had received complaints from people using the path with boogies, and they were getting stuck in the areas between the wooden platforms. And, that got us into thinking, how would that translate to somebody being on a wheelchair? We just started having a lot of concerns because of the expense of this different material, which is over $100,000, and all the questions and the issues that have been raised, not only by people in our community, but just hearing the experience of folks that have already used it. So I guess that's the conundrum where we're at. Can certainly move forward and test it, but chances are it may not be embraced by everybody who we intend to be users of it. So we've talked about a couple ideas and pros and cons of each one. Certainly not a perfect solution, but it is a solution in some capacity. So I'll let Douglas sort of talk us through that and some ideas that we have.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to what Desiree has said about kind of things giving us pause is, we progressed kind of thinking that we were going in a good direction, and we got really right to the finish line. And a couple of questions came up. They led to us doing a little more research. I personally thought that I knew Sullivan's Island had it in place. I thought they were happy with it. turns out that they were in fact very unhappy with it and pulled it up. I also didn't really fully recognize the Public Works Department's hesitation with the material. You know, this idea that they currently can pull up the Moby mat, scrape it flat, reset it. You know, they say that can take them only a couple of hours. They can do it in an afternoon. They have reservations about their ability to do it on this material at all, really. So they kind of came forward and said, you know, at the end of the day, we don't really think it's going to be a good fit down there. The last thing is this idea of it being driven on. The vendor has assured us that it would be okay to be driven on. We started kind of drilling down on the warranty and they weren't completely forthcoming with the warranty if it did break when it got driven on. So just a little bit, I would say numerous small things have given us considerable pause. And I think as an alternative, what we feel like probably is the best path forward is to continue using the Moby mat material as it's been. I think we would, the real benefit of the slatted boardwalk material is we think that in a heavy usage situation, we should get about 20 years of use out of that material, where we're only getting 3 to 5 years out of the Moby mat. And the Moby mat, while it is cheaper, you know, in this installation, we're looking at $30,000 worth of Moby mat versus $100,000 of the Mr. Boardwalk, but you're having to replace it 6 or 7 times in the same span of life. So for the life cycle cost, we think the Mr. Boardwalk is a good material. We also think that it's, you know, probably a durable, aesthetically pleasing material. We think it won't have the humping. You know, the Access Moby mat, it tends to bulge in places, which make it challenging if you're on a wheelchair. So we do think that there's some benefit to it, but I guess we're not sure that this high profile and this large of an expanse is the best first step. So I think we're proposing to continue largely as we have at 42nd with Access Moby mat and try a smaller piece of this material at not quite such a high profile, high usage path, and maybe we only do 20, 30 feet of it. And then, you know, get some experience driving on it, seeing how it does. We couldn't even find really a sample to ride we were just trying to find a piece to put a wheelchair over, and we couldn't do it. So all of that has kind of given us pause. So I think from our perspective, we would recommend just putting the Moby mat back out. Well, it's there now, but maybe a new Moby mat, and then kind of doing a test pilot at identify another location, try some of this, see if it works. If it works, I think it's potentially an improvement, but I think we'd like to know that for certain before we do this level of investment.
Well, I would like to say I'm happy that you paused on this and did some more research, because I know there were a lot of questions that came up from citizens who had done their own research too, and there were good questions that were coming up as well. So it looks like you really dug in, so to speak, and tried to get more feedback as to how this has been working in other areas. And by digging down into that, you found that other communities haven't been so enamored of it after the fact, and that our own Public Works Department is not really enamored of what it would take to actually keep the upkeep on the e-pay, basically, versus the Moby mat, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
We've also talked about what we can do proactively to address that humping issue, whether or not increasing the frequency where we go out there and basically resurface it a little bit to eliminate some of that humping. That's certainly possible, but we didn't feel 100% confident with moving forward with such a high expenditure at this point, based on all that we've reported today.
John?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the overview. Just want to clarify a couple clarifying questions for myself. I heard three alternatives to what's on the table right now: the original proposal of the elevated path, the subsequent Mr. Boardwalk, and now the current, which is the Moby Mat, which is there now. In all cases, Greenbelt funding would be applicable to do either the new Moby Mat or either of these two new alternatives.
We haven't requested any changes to the scope if we continue using the Moby Mat. We have an inventory of Moby Mat in-house, and that's something that we typically just order. I'm sure that that would be, I mean, I don't want to say I'm sure, but I don't expect why there would be any issue with the Greenbelt funding, Greenbelt program funding that material if they were agreeable with Mr. Boardwalk.
And well, that kind of is a seg to my follow-up question, which is when we apply for the Greenbelt funding, and this is for the public's knowledge as well as for me to clarify, we have a very explicit purpose and goal stated with access to this funding. And in this case, it is 100% towards creating accessibility to folks with special needs as it relates to access. We talk about wheelchairs a lot, but it's anybody who has some sort of impairment in terms of getting out to the beach, right?
Not necessarily, no. It's any funding would be eligible projects or include.
No, but we applied.
Yes, we did
In
apply for this
case,
particular project.
This
You're
one is
correct.
specifically, I just want to say, like, the goal of what we're doing with this funding is to create accessibility to the beach.
Correct.
That is what we're trying to do. And if we were going to go back to the Greenbelt and say, hey, we're not happy with Mr. Boardwalk, we want to switch to Moby Mat, we wouldn't change anything except for the manner in which we're achieving that goal.
Correct.
That would be a correct assumption. And in terms of feedback from the intended target, the folks who would be using this, it sounds like we've spoken to several of them.
We've spoken to one.
To one. Okay. If I were to make some assumptions here, I would assume the elevated boardwalk would be the absolute ideal for the target audience.
That is correct.
And the major concern was from the neighbors surrounding that path of the impact to traffic there.
Correct.
Due to non-target users. In other words, any folks who might just say, I would prefer this beach path because it's so nice,
Correct.
versus I need it to get out to the beach.
Correct.
And what's the feedback on the Moby Mat from our sample size of one?
He prefers that to the
Mr. Boardwalk.
I would kind of, I would confirm your assumption, though, that the golden standard, I think by the sample size of one, is the second boardwalk. The elevated kind of purpose-built explicitly for a beach chair
Yeah.
kind of remains that would be the ultimate, I think, to provide accessibility.
Yeah.
Which was the original scope.
Sure. Well, I think if that is our goal, and I don't think we've had larger discussions around accessibility across the island. We've had sort of non-specific, broad sweeping discussions of creating accessibility without necessarily putting together an action plan of, okay, here's what it looks like for Isle of Palms to say we are doing something about accessibility. And I don't know if that's something for this committee here or for another committee. But I think that kind of larger discussion might be important way to answer this question. I'm not sure where I fall. It sounds like Mr. Boardwalk is out. So that sounds relatively obvious. The question for me that I'm battling with is, okay, if the goal of this whole thing is to create accessibility, there's two options here. One is kind of cheaper and easier, and one is a little bit more ideal. Talking about testing Mr. Boardwalk because it could be, I don't know if it's worth testing or not. I guess it would depend on the scope of the test, but the real question is, should we consider the boardwalk? I don't know if I understand the concerns of the residents down there, so I'm not putting those aside, but how well founded are they? I don't know. And I don't know that we necessarily would have data. Let's see, we have the front beach and the 21st Avenue. Are those the only two?
21st it's ADA. It's ADA, yes. We have another one at 46, but that one is not ADA compliant.
We have two at the front beach, at the board, at the restrooms and next to the sea cabins. We have one that kind of comes and goes at, is it 9th?
Yeah.
9th, but we have
Moby.
Moby Mat at 9th.
But it, as the end, sometimes you have a cliff at the end, sometimes you
Mhm.
don't, sometimes you do, sometimes it's relatively accessible, but other times it's
Sure.
not. So
Mhm.
it's not a perfect path, but occasionally it lends itself well.
And at 46, we have a ramp going up and steps going down
Right.
on the
Correct.
beach side. So it's not compliant.
Correct.
Correct.
I know we had a lot of discussion. It does appear that Mr. Boardwalk would be not the option to take here. And I too, I go along with what John said. I don't know that we really even need to test Mr. Boardwalk in another location if the feedback we've been getting from neighboring communities, others that have used it, they're not having good results with it. I just don't know what the end game would be for us to even test it.
Yeah, the only difference would be that for example, Sullivan's, it was about 10 years ago that they used it and they pulled it out because the wooden slats would continuously break. Our proposal was Ipe, so that would be a stronger material. We don't anticipate that happening. But the issues of the space between the slats and people getting stuck on them, I think that would happen with wheelchairs as well as, they had issues with the people
With walkers.
or walkers, correct.
We did specify
I didn't get that.
narrow gap
Mhm.
Mhm.
slats, but we don't have a way of knowing exactly what Sullivan's Island had. It was, because they sell it in various
Mhm.
gaps, widths. Again, the vendor kind of tells us that the narrow gaps are fine for wheelchairs, but we don't really know that without a place to test it out.
Right. I remember us asking that question several weeks ago about
Right.
the width of the
Width of the
gap. And
gap.
I think we decided if we were going to go that way, it was a ½ inch, I think it was, or something like
Yes, it
that.
was right. It was a skinny gap. We just don't know what
Right.
Sullivan's Island had, but they confirmed that gap is a problem.
Mhm.
It was for them anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, in regards to Moby Mat, I mean, we've had some questions and concerns too about people that just want to go out and maybe if they have a wheelchair or whatever, want to just, sit off to the side away from just the regular traffic going back and forth and just, look over the shoreline. Is there a possibility we could do some things like the bump outs on either side of the Moby Mat that would accommodate something like that?
I would think we could.
Yeah, I'm sure we could.
Mm.
I guess, going back to a point that Councilmember Moy said, what was the initial goal? And this was something that was brought up before, several years ago now by the former Real Property Committee. And the goal was to enhance ADA accessibility. And that is a request that the city gets all the time. And certainly something that the city should strive for improving and enhancing.
Mhm.
If we don't do anything and, just continue to use Moby Mat, I don't think that our ADA community is going to see that as an enhancement. Maybe we can, work on it a little bit more and more frequently to make sure that we address the humps. But we've been using Moby Mat in that area for a long time, and it still generates constant requests from citizens that the city does more to accommodate people who have physical disabilities. So, does the city want to reevaluate or revisit the original scope? Go back to the community, members of that neighborhood and explain again that, this area would still be part of a residential district. Obviously, handicap parking is available to anybody, whether they have a residential district sticker or not. But yeah, I think it goes back to, does the city want to do something above and beyond what we've already done for many years to accommodate folks in that area? Because it is the most ideal location because of its topography, the ideal location to do something different and better for people who want to access the beach who may not be able to.
Well, it sounds like what we need to do is we need to go back to full council and have some discussion about this? John, Kevin?
I'm,
I mean, I'm not sure that, the next steps, whether it's Ways and Means or
Yeah.
council or whatever.
Or does it go to Public Safety Committee or,
It
Uh,
could, I mean, yeah, it would go back to city council for some global direction of where we want to go. Do we want to just change the Moby Mount material more frequently and then understand what the expense of that would be? Or does the city want to continue to pursue an enhancement in that area? And go back to the original option of a boardwalk? Because this was looked at and evaluated as an alternative to a boardwalk because of the feedback that the city received from community members. And to say, just for the record, I don't think that the concerns were not about wanting to provide accessibility for people for handicapped people. I think that they were all supportive of anything that could be done to accommodate these folks. But I guess they had concerns about increased traffic and sort of it becoming a new attraction in that area.
Did, excuse me, did we ever price out that boardwalk? The original?
Several years ago, at this point, not with the current market. But if you take as an example, the Mr. Boardwalk material that was over 100,000, an elevated boardwalk, I would think would be twice that, if not more.
So back to the sample. Do you think we
Oh,
can work with Mr. Boardwalk? Say, hey, give us a 30 piece to try it out without necessarily
give
charging
us-
us?
I don't know if they would give it, I doubt they would give it to us. I mean, it's custom made,
Mhm.
very high dollar material, stainless steel rods and, it's not an inexpensive gift that they would be providing us. I think that when we pivoted away from the two paths, in my mind, I think the staff probably presented council with, hey, this is an easy kind of middle of the road solution that does it all relatively well. And I would say that we probably didn't know all that we know now. And if we could do it all over again, we probably wouldn't have given you that kind of easy out. So I don't know if you go back to just looking at, do we just continue as pretty much it's been, or do we look at going back to that original plan with a standalone elevated boardwalk? We probably gave you an easy out when we shouldn't have.
I also recall, just for the record too, that there were concerns about the standalone, that the Real Property Committee had concerns about the standalone option that would require some type of clearing of vegetation along that path. And that was not something that was embraced, if you will, for that area.
I remember that discussion. That wasn't on the committee, but I remember that discussion being had about
Mhm.
concerns about the vegetation. Well, I think we all realize we want to do everything we can on this island to be ADA compliant and make it easier for anyone who has handicaps to have access to the beach. And it just seems to me like we need to take this discussion here and take it to council and have some further discussion, discuss what you all have come up with through the additional research, and let's have a broader discussion.
If I may,
Yes.
what's the current condition of the Moby Mount? I haven't been to that access in a while. What's the state of the mat that's there now? How imminent do we need to make a decision, I guess is really what I'm getting at.
I think it's in decent shape. I think right now it's as it's always been, and I think one of your potential paths forward is to leave it as
Yeah.
it's always been. So I would say there's not any great urgency in making a decision.
Yeah, it's not in really bad shape. I mean, is it perfect? By no means is it, but I was down there several days ago and, definitely would like to see some improvements, because you still have some of the humping and that sort of thing that goes on, but overall, it's in pretty decent shape. We had a question also that came up in regards to some of the type of wheelchairs that other areas are using. Like Fernandino Beach, I think, has got, the fat tire chairs that they provide for some of the residents. And I don't know, maybe that's part of the larger discussion too. Is that something that we could somehow look at that for, all ADA compliant paths? And if we could do that in a secure manner, I don't know how that would look. That's something we'd have to have a discussion about, like, where would you store those, and how would you make those available to anybody that needed one? So,
That's-
Mhm.
That's where I was headed as well. And I
Oh,
was
I'm
gonna,
sorry.
no, that's okay. That's it. I'm glad we're on the same page. Particularly if we choose the do nothing Moby Mat route,
mhm,
I think doing nothing is not an option, I guess. And
I
I
agree.
think, regardless of whether or not we go Moby Mat or elevated or we test Mr. Boardwalk and it works, or we find some other easy out that is a good hybrid solution, provided, at least providing some access to those wheelchairs. I don't know how many the city should own or could own. But I think that, and I don't know if Greenbelt funding could potentially go towards that either. But those would be kind of the questions that I would like to make of the staff. And then maybe present to council. It's something that we're going to propose, but I do think, that is something that this council, past councils have made a priority, and we want to continue is creating as much accessibility as possible. And that's the wheelchair seems like a relatively easy way for us to do that. Even if it's, the city has 3 or 4 that you can request through the fire department or some other, or the police department or some other department, the recreation department, I don't know.
I think Dr. Smiley sent that Fernandino Beach project. He sent that to all the council, which was, and I read that. It was pretty good, pretty intriguing what they're doing down there. And I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, Desiree, or not. Maybe you didn't get copied on it. I'll check. I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
recall.
I know it went to council this morning, I believe.
Mm.
We just have to check, see if you and Douglas were
Yeah.
copied on that.
I'll forward it.
All right, so should we do something in the form of a motion here to,
You could make a motion to recommend to council further discussion about next steps with the 42nd Avenue improvements for ADA accessibility.
So move.
okay, the motion's been made
Second,
and seconded. Any other discussion?
does staff have clarity?
Yes.
Talk about it more with them in the future.
And thanks for the due diligence and checking on that.
Right. And by the way, I look back over some meeting minutes. I mean, this has been out there for years.
Mhm.
The discussion, I know it goes back a long way, so certainly I hope we can get to some conclusions here fairly quickly when we go back to council and talk about what some possible solutions would be. So, all right, the motion's been made, it's been seconded, and all in favor, say aye. Aye. No opposed? All right. Okay, item D, update on proposed public dock and green space at the Isle of Palms Marina. Desiree?
Not a whole lot of update on that yet. We have been reaching out to some vendors that we could potentially work with for the construction, the final design and construction. But other than that, we're pretty much at a stalemate until the court adjudicates the case against the holdover tenant who has refused to leave the premises after receiving notice of the lease not being renewed.
Okay, and I know since we don't have any update, I still would like for us to leave this on the agenda on a monthly
Absolutely.
basis, just so that we can, have mention of it, ongoing discussion, and we don't know in terms of the adjudication, what the complete timing will be, but we know that is moving forward. All right, so item number E under old business, discussion and consideration of the noise agreement with Marker 116 LLC. Desiree, I'll turn that over to you. I know that we had some earlier discussion about that, I think.
Sure, yes. So I presented to you all the recommended changes to the language of that agreement based on our previous discussion with some confusing terms, if you will, that we wanted to clarify before moving forward. I was hoping that I would get some feedback from the marina tenants, the marina restaurant tenants regarding the updated language. I talked to John Bushnell this morning, and I believe they either had just received feedback from their attorney or were about to receive feedback from their attorney. So he requested that the committee doesn't take an action on this just yet. Again, they're not going to start operating next month, so there's no urgency in getting this approved. So unless there's any specific questions about the language is being proposed, we would just continue to add this to the agenda for next month, or hopefully at that point, we hear back from them and y'all can make a recommendation to council. And this doesn't require 2 readings, so once it's approved by council, it would be ratified.
Okay, any questions, John, Kevin? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to new business. And item number A, discussion of changes to the zoning ordinance to permanently allow outdoor dining at restaurants. Desiree
Do you have this one?
or Douglas?
So we've talked about this internally, and just for the benefit of the group, the way outdoor dining currently works is each individual goes, makes application for a special exception to be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. When the board reviews it, they look at specifics around the property, you know, what's literally next door, how will it impact them, and they put conditions on that approval. You know, sometimes they'll put a number of seats, a limit on the number of seats. In fact, they've most recently put a minimum number of seats to ensure that it doesn't become a bar, you know, with just standing room only. So they really kind of analyze these things in an in-depth fashion and come up with conditions. I think from the staff's perspective, that's worked well, and I don't know that we would want to encourage you all to disrupt that, you know, to kind of give blanket approval. I think it would be pretty tough to reel that in. Additionally, I think that, you know, I don't think that it's been too burdensome for those that have wanted to do it. And I think that when the COVID emergency ordinances allowed folks to do it, I think some did, and I don't know, they may have all by now kind of reeled it back, even though they haven't really had to. So from my perspective, I don't know that I would recommend that you wholesalely change things. One item that, you know, I might ask you to consider is that in response to the Board of Zoning Appeals, that they basically got 3 requests right on the heels of one another. One was for the county park to have a food truck. One was for the marina to have the Coastal Expeditions trailer. And a third one was for an Airstream at the boathouse. Those 3 in a row led to some concern, and really the Airstream at the boathouse had some folks irritated by it, and they didn't like that change. So the council at that time enacted an ordinance that not only specified that you couldn't have a mobile unit like a food truck or a trailer, they also added language in there that that was that you had to do it from within a permanent building. That probably is a holdover from that time. That probably is most at odds with what people were probably doing and got used to during the COVID regulations. So if anything, I might just suggest, if you are so inclined, if you feel like the community enjoyed being able to be kind of outside, truly outside, you know, I know that some restaurants had it in the parking lot, well away from the building. The code currently, as it's written, would not allow even the board to approve that, because it's an explicit prohibition. I would put that as, you know, if I was kind of could wave my magic wand and get things to how I think that the community would like them the most, that would probably be my suggestion. Just take that prohibition out and let people operate from outside of the footprint of the building. Probably not in a trailer, but just serve food in parts of their property if they choose to. That's like I said, that's a 180 from what council wanted just probably only maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So, but maybe feelings have changed a bit with the looser regulations.
Well, they, in my mind, they certainly did change. I mean, it was really the outdoor dining, seating. I think that was a real plus for us down at Front Beach and over here in the shopping center as well, when the businesses were able to do that and to serve their customers outside in a safe way. So, and I've been accustomed to over the past few years, of course, last year they didn't do it at all, but I go back to Second Sunday on King Street and some of the things they did down there when they would close King Street itself, for that second Sunday and then have outdoor dining. And I think it's always just been well received. So John or Kevin, I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts on what you think about sidewalk dining or outdoor dining going forward.
Yeah, I think these businesses continue to need help, and I would support anything to, help them with outdoor dining and service that we could do. And I'd like to, I don't know how we do it, but I'd like to figure out how we get a food truck down, the restaurant being built, while it's being built. I know a lot of people I see down there ask about
I think we've got that on the agenda as an item next. Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I concur with everything that Kevin just said and you as well, Mr. Chair. I was intrigued by the Charleston ordinance that was included in our packet with the sort of a sunset a year from last January. And I don't know if you guys figured out how much I like pilots by now, but same way we're doing it with surfing. We've sort of had a little bit of a pilot with this already during COVID, but I think we can acknowledge it wasn't a real true pilot because everyone knew that it was for the purpose of during pandemic times versus a pilot to potentially test for permanent times. So feedback was probably less forthcoming with that understanding. So I don't know, Douglas, in terms of the recommendation that you've just given us, that we maybe roll back components of things that are in versus the wholesale sweeping broad change. The sweeping broad change is what we've been living in for the last 14 months. And I think if we were to more or less replicate what the city of Charleston has done, that would be still the wholesale sweeping change, but on a temporary basis, which would therefore make it a lot easier. It's got the built-in sunset. So if we felt like there was abuse or that feelings of change of residence, it would be relatively easy. No action undoes everything. So I'm actually I appreciated seeing their approach and felt like it might be a good one for us to take as well.
Yeah, and that's why we included it there. It does expire in 2022, but as you can see, they also have it has a permit process or an approval process. So right now, the way we do it is as part of the emergency ordinance that keeps being renewed every 60 days, that businesses are able to have outdoor sales and dining. When that expires, I think that one option is to somewhat mimic what City of Charleston's doing and still require some type of approval from the building department to make sure that, they're not expanding way past their capacity, or make sure that we have expectations about the use of sidewalk dining too, because sidewalks, we want to make sure that they're accessible for the general public to access different locations. So certainly something that we can look at if that's the direction that y'all would like to take this discussion, and see how we can use some components of this ordinance that's been tested at City of Charleston and make it applicable to our circumstance.
When does the current emergency ordinance expire?
Early July. And between the end of June and early July. I'm gonna say that.
After the next city council meeting, before the.
After the next city council meeting. So yeah, June
That's-
26th is sort of coming to me because it was April 27th. So yes, June 26th and June 22nd would be the city council meeting. And if there's an ordinance for first reading, once approved, the pending ordinance doctrine would kick in. So would allow the city to implement the ordinance even before second reading is ratified, and the ordinance is ratified. So we can certainly work on something and present it to city council at the end of this month for first reading and further discussion. We can share with the committee beforehand, make sure that any feedback, just respond, if you all want to provide some feedback on it before putting it on the package, just send that to me directly, not copy your fellow council members. And we can get something.
Yeah, if you could do that, if you could just, share with us on the committee, once you put some things together, then
Mhm.
let's plan on putting on city council agenda. We don't need to do anything here today in regards to a vote or anything. We're just
sir.
allowing you to work on this.
Correct.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, so new business item B, consideration of allowing the new Marina restaurant tenants to operate a food truck at the Isle of Palms Marina prior to opening the restaurant as a city sanctioned activity. So the way I'm reading that, the food truck, if allowed, would be a city sanctioned activity because of it being like a special event or something. Is that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So it could be as a city sanctioned event. As you all, I think Douglas already mentioned this, that the code prohibits any new food trucks unless they're either approved by BOZA or no, gotta be city council. City council approves it as part of a city sanctioned or city hosted or city sponsored event. I had this conversation with John Bushnell and requested that they provide some type of schedule to the city so that you all would be approving certain events throughout the summer. Certainly not something we want. It's not sustainable to use the city sanctioned status forever. But knowing that restaurant's going to be opening very soon, I don't think, because we have this exception here that could apply, rather than changing the code for this particular, we wouldn't be able to just change it for this particular circumstance. It would apply to everything. So I think we can go ahead and council could approve those series as city sanctioned, and they would be able to operate a food truck while, right before they open the restaurant. So this is just informational. They haven't submitted a request yet. They will
Right.
be working on that and giving us as much specifics as they have. But the question was raised last month, what would the city need to do to allow this type of activity to happen? And this would be one option available to the city.
Okay, so this would be added to city council. We'll have further discussion on that.
If I receive the request from the marina tenants
Right,
between now and city council, we can certainly put it there under real property for discussion.
okay,
But right now, the ball's in their court to put together the schedule and make that request to the city.
okay. Don, Kevin?
No. Sounds pretty straightforward.
Right, okay, thank you very much.
Actually, I'm sorry. Was their reaction the same as what I'm having? Like, okay, there's a straightforward pathway.
Yeah.
We just need to basically define the times we want to have the food truck as each one is its own individual event. and
Correct.
Submit those applications.
All right, miscellaneous business, do we have any?
We do not.
Okay. Our next meeting date is 1:30 PM, Monday, July the 12th, 2021. And no executive session is needed today, so do I hear a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 You could be the Ryan Buchanan motion to adjourn.
I tried to make my name as the one who's second. Yes. I tried to be the second, like the vice president.